Greetings from Phoenix, Arizona, where the opportunity, sadly, will be improved as with the unfortunate wildfires in LA. And that's not the reason I'm here. I was actually here for other reasons, for a workshop and retreat, and also to obviously look at real estate. And the opportunity is likely great in the Arizona and Phoenix area. Anyways, uh, this show, this week's show is titled Ontario Rental Market Update with Rent Panda. And Rent Panda is going to be sharing, the owner's going to be sharing what he is investing in himself, where to advertise rental properties, and where to look for tenants, which markets are expected to outperform in Ontario for specifically tenant demand. All this and more on this week's Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians since 2016. That's right. This show, while not impressive in flash, is one of the two longest running podcasts on real estate investing in Canada. Many shows, podcasts have gone away. Many just started. Almost no one else out there has over 300 hours of podcast content. But even still, this market is forever changing. My own investment strategy has changed based on what the market is telling me. Hence, we all need to be up to date. Hence, we have the founder, owner of Rent Panda, my good friend Hart Togman, back on the show. Rent Panda now manages properties all across Ontario, and the timing is special. Vacancies across Ontario are rising. Credit ratings among tenant applicants are declining. Inflation is high. Landlord Tenant Board is at its worst. Relationships between tenants themselves and tenant and staff, property management staff, is it's all declining. What better time to expand one's property management business? Hart is obviously a good guy, and he details for us his preferred investment strategy, student rentals, as well as which which is actually a great segue into me reading for you a chapter I just wrote and for my upcoming book. The chapter is titled "The Best Deal Our Client Ever Invested in." It's not what you expect. It's not one I would have ever anticipated either, because I would have bought all of them. The year was 2013. Non-conforming multifamily properties were being cracked down upon in cities everywhere, especially in Hamilton, for good reason. Tenants were getting hurt. Many were even, unfortunately, getting really hurt in fires due to lack or poorly maintained fire safety systems. If you've ever owned a property needing a window in a basement room where there previously was none, or had to replace a fire escape, you know the cost can be very significant. Fire escapes range between $30,000 to $70,000 for just a three-story triplex. University and colleges were growing in student population and needing more off-campus housing from private landlords. Student rentals, in my experience, are a best practice investment for small landlords, as the building and fire code requirements are significantly lower than that of a duplex. We only have one kitchen, so we don't have the same fire risk and fire separation requirements as you would in a 2 or 3 or 4 family home. Now, about the investment. My property manager and good friend Roger gave me a tip about a large house builder near Brock University in St. Catharines, who had new construction houses suitable for student rentals. This was a high quality builder. They had won numerous awards for the Niagara region, who had built up. Now, this is different. This is Niagara region back in 2013. So the market wasn't crazy hot. They would actually build houses as they were sold, as in they didn't just sell it the whole plan. It's more like, mom and pop would go buy a house and then they'd start building it one by one. Really different than the world we see today. Yeah. And one only needed a 5,000 total deposit, 2,500 upon signing, another 2,500 within about a month. This is over 12 years ago, so my memories aren't perfect. Now these were uh, four bedroom houses, 1,900 and 1,700 square foot semi-detached or townhouses, respectively. But because we were buying off a plan, working with a quality builder who had capacity to do custom work for us, I was able to design the house to be an ideal, safe city, building, and fire code compliant property for as many bedrooms as I wanted. uh, I met with the builder's designer and made the following changes to their plan. We shrunk the principal bedroom, formerly known as the master bedroom, to allocate more space towards the smaller bedrooms to make them more equal in size. Converted the dining room into a bedroom that I can now rent for about $6,000 per year. Removed closet doors, remove closet doors, saving thousands of dollars. These often get closet doors often get removed or damaged by students, so why bother providing them? And nobody complained. Not one. Finish the basement to include a three-piece bathroom. That means stand-up shower, sink and toilet, of course. Also, in the basement would be two bedrooms each with an egress window, which is an oversized window to allow more sunlight. And at the time, the requirement was 4.1 square feet in size, which can be opened without tools for a person to climb out in case of fire. All the walls and ceilings were insulated with fire-rated sound insulation and drywall. Again, these were all fire-rated products. We were basically following the Ontario Building Code as if the property was a multi-family property. Rough-ins for the basement kitchen were installed. At the time, basement kitchens weren't allowed, nor were we planning on providing them to limit fire risk. But so we only did the rough-ins. And so should the bylaws ever change or should our clients ever want to suite the basement, it would be extremely easy to do so. No carpet. We replaced all the carpet in the plans with vinyl plank, as it is waterproof and incredibly durable. Vinyl plank is basically the best practice of pretty much every real estate investor I know out there, because it is so durable, waterproof. If there's ever a flood, you can really generally just mop it up, and it's much cheaper to install. It's usually like half the price of a laminate, and again, way more durable than carpet. Um, yeah. It's just so many wins, and it's way faster to install. Less tools are needed to install vinyl plank. Um, or I'm old school because when vinyl plank came out, it was called vinyl plank. Later, it was called luxury vinyl plank. So the acronym is LVP, which I absolutely refuse to use. Anyways, my requested changes added around 40,000 to the price of the house, which is a fraction of what it would cost us to have contractors renovate an existing house. And so that would also have taken longer, and we could have been at risk of having to get permits. And of course, there's always delays in any sort of renovation project. Um, the best part here, why this investment became the best for that our clients have ever done was they can now include the cost of all these upgrades, these $40,000 upgrades, into the mortgage as the house would appraise for all the work that we're getting done. And then in turn, they can invest the minimum 20% down payment plus closing costs. So by minimizing the investment dollars, the return on investment ballooned and also on the because the investment property that costs $315 to buy, $315,000 to buy, we were renting them for $3,150 inclusive per month, inclusive of utilities. So that makes the gross rent yield of annual rent to price at about 12%, which is something you don't see in Canada anymore. So needless to say, many of our clients bought these properties, and of course, they're ecstatic for the returns. Now, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Management of student rentals is not the easiest for people who want to self-manage or even from property managers. It was a rocky ride for many. Some didn't make it, didn't sold earlier than ideal. But from the few who got lucky, who happened to hire what turned out to be the best property management company in town. Shout out to Adrian Kulikowski and Student Rentals 101. Now, fast forward to 2023, when our client decided to sell one of these properties, he sold a townhouse while the market was still pretty hot in 2023. They sold the townhouse for $804,000 in multiple offers to a mom that was desperate for a house for her kid going to Brock University. Now, on price appreciation alone, the return on investment was over 400%. Now it's 10 years. Over a 10-year period, 400% return, not factoring in mortgage payment, the pay down of the principal of the mortgage over those 10 years, and cash flow. Now, Winterberry is the name of the street. Back in 2012, when we first found the area, it was just a road lined with empty dirt lots on both sides of the road. Fast forward to today, Winterberry is known as the top destination for student housing for Brock students. It's basically a household name for Brock University students. The bus service drastically improved, which I helped as I personally lobbied St. Catharines Transit to reroute its bus service and have pickups where our clients' properties were located. And what we found out was that students do appreciate the newer, more modern housing style. Bigger bedrooms, bigger house, stainless steel appliances, stone countertops in the kitchen and bathrooms, versus the majority of the houses in St. Catharines that are rented to students were built in the 1950s. They're smaller, not renovated, and a lot of them do not have basic fire safety systems. Maybe just smoke alarms, but none of the egress windows that we have, and also fire and sound separation we had in the walls and ceilings. So and then all this translated into a big difference as my clients were able to charge a premium rent. Premium rents have equated to above market values for our clients' rental properties because investors indeed value cash flow. My clients' townhouses and semis actually sell more than bigger houses in the same area built by the same builder because the incomes justify those prices. Now, these are the rewards of highest and best use investing, and with a little luck, we got a lot of luck. Sadly, my wife and I didn't buy any of these as we were focused on basement apartment suiting strategy. Uh, yeah, I've always admitted we're not perfect. University student rentals in general is the preferred investment strategy for the small investor since student non-payment of rent is very, very rare in our experience. Hence, one avoids the risk of ending up with the landlord tenant board, which overwhelmingly favors the tenants. We've also been lucky with all the price and rent appreciation, regular turnover of tenants as they graduate school and leave to return home. Uh, as tenants move up turnover, it allows us to raise price rents to market, and that's just beneficial to the investor, which is not less common in regular rentals. Rich parents signing as guarantors helps us out as well. But again, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Declared student rental, aid lender financing is basically non-existent. Student rentals with aid lender mortgages at aid lender rates were either not student rentals at the time the bank appraised the property, or the appraiser did not, for some unforeseen reason, did not notice the house with six or seven bedrooms near a university or college. For some reason, they didn't think that property would be used as a student rental. My last mortgage on a student rental was 10% from a B lender, maximum 65 loan to value. And that 65 percent loan to value was based on the original value that I purchased for the home. They would not recognize recent appraisals uh, during the refinance process to allow me to take back more of my equity. Point is, from a financing perspective, student rentals are not scalable in my experience. Investors have to be prepared to have their capital tied up until they sell. Why? Because student rentals are not a recognized use by most zoning bylaws. Hence, banks don't want to lend on them the way that we want them to. Then there is rental licensing, which can be another couple $100 per year in costs, plus a couple thousand upfront between licensing fees and renovation requirements to get into compliance. And that is the truth about real estate investing for Canadians in student rentals, in my experience. Now, if you'd like to learn more about other best practices in real estate investing, we do have two webinars coming up. One is on January 18th, where we will be hosting a virtual tour of properties my clients and I have purchased in the States. They'll actually be hybrid, so we'll have some seats available in person and online as well. Also on January 25th, we will be teaching the best practices on how to sell a tenanted property. Where our focus will be on Ontario, as that is our experience, but I'm sure our lessons and experience can be translated to places like BC and Quebec, where the laws favor the tenant. But again, this is a bit of a specialty of ours because honestly, not many real estate professionals are landlords, let alone have as much experience as we do in owning as many properties as we do with tenants. And yeah, it's kind of the sad thing about real estate investing in Ontario that the best practice for uh, selling a rental property is to sell it without a tenant. And to get it without a tenant, there's some hoops to jump through. And again, we are specialists in this area. Saturday, January 25th, we will be hosting a free webinar on the subject, and hope to see you there. Now on to this week's guest. Again, Hart is a friend. I refer him clients all the time for tenant location services. This may sound like a paid endorsement, and full disclosure, Hart pays me nothing. We receive zero compensation for me having Hart on the show and me sending him referrals. It's too bad we're selling the our rest of our Ontario portfolio in the near future, as I could have asked him for some favors, but no, nothing. We get nothing, which I don't mind, as my judgment is not clouded. We get along well because we're both on a mission to help Canadians get ahead in life without taking away too much time from their lives and families by streamlining their investments. That we both in different ways help them sleep at night, and we both volunteer for nonprofits that support landlords. Hart's company Rent Panda is an expert on rentals, providing both property management and tenant location services, while also using the same tools that we recommend on the show, like single key and front lobby. Any Ontario landlord not using these companies is exposing themselves to unnecessary risks. Again, Hart is a professional, and he uses these companies as well. The risks that I mentioned, uh, these risks don't honestly exist in landlord-friendly USA. But I digress. You can find Rent Panda along with a bunch of free online resources that every Ontario landlord needs at rentpanda.ca. Please enjoy the show. Hello, Hart. What's keeping you busy these days?
Big question, Erwin. Big question. Well, starting from the top, I've got a 1.5-year-old at home. I got a new baby on the way in March.
I don't think I knew that.
So yeah,
No, I think I knew that. I don't remember having done that.
doesn't matter.
Okay.
You don't have to remember
Congratulations.
everything. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So we're gonna have two under two. So that'll keep me busy. On a journey of self-development. We didn't talk about this beforehand off camera, but I'm in a new mindset of personal development is business development, which has been awesome. So that's been about a year in the making. And yeah, then running Rent Panda on the day to day. So all of our rental services from software, leasing, property management, paralegal services, running teams, figuring out new systems, dealing with the Canadian real estate market, and yeah, trying to just make the world a little bit better than the day before. That sounds like a good day to day overview.
You do a lot of hard shit.
Yeah.
Like, let's start with the self-development hard shit. Like, what kind of hard shit? You mentioned ice cold plunges before we were recording.
Yeah. I mean,
This is like a cold shower, or actually like this is ice buckets.
so not on the day to day, but we've got a family cottage up in Muskoka. So I like the wintertime best because I can drill a hole in the ice and properly get in the lake. We were up there last weekend, and so sauna to cold plunge in November water temperature is a lot of fun. And I like seeing other
Fun for
people.
you, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun
Yeah.
for me. And when I go with other people, it's fun seeing them suffer for the first time because I enjoy it now. So you got to push to the next level. But I think ultimately, probably almost 15 years ago now, I got into the world of mountain climbing.
Mm.
My brother, who I only realized today has seeded all of the ideas that got me into all this crazy shit that I do on the day to day. But my brother came up to me. I was, 20 years old, 22 maybe. And he was like, "Hey, let's go climb Kilimanjaro." And I didn't know what Kilimanjaro was. And I was like, sure. Older brother asked the younger
Right,
brother to do something. I'm game. Of course I would do that.
right.
And we ended up getting intestinal parasites that they thought was altitude sickness. Did a 16-hour trek through the night to get off the mountain, and we were sick and vomiting on the side of the trail. And my brother looked at me and was like, "I am never doing this again." And I got hooked into mountain climbing. Like, I just absolutely loved the experience and the camaraderie and the challenge. And your face says it all. It's essentially extended suffering. So since then, almost every year I've done a mountain climb. I run a charity called Summit for Sick Kids, which is raising money to fund the oncology department and cancer genetics research by climbing mountains. But essentially, extended suffering is part of my life, and I think uh, ultimately true growth happens in that area of suffering and the discomfort. And I think society these days is very much positioned to make things as comfortable as possible.
Mm.
People are looking for better, faster, easier, more comfortable, less work. Order it from your phone, order it from the computer. And I very much believe in getting your hands dirty, doing hard shit, and suffering to grow. It's not masochism, but a good amount of suffering really pushes you out of your comfort zone and makes you excel as a human.
How old are you again? Remind me.
37.
37.
Yeah. So good.
So, do you say you climb a mountain every year then?
Try to. Yeah.
Anything local, or are you always traveling?
No, I mean, we're in flat country here. Um,
Rattlesnake Point was challenging.
yeah, yeah. Rattlesnake Point is like, I want to throw my kid on my back and go hiking Rattlesnake Point with the family.
Oh, I mean, go vertical. Don't go
Yeah,
walking.
fair enough. There is good climbing at Rattlesnake. So the last one, as an example, was Wyoming, which is relatively accessible from here. Or Denver is some good mountaineering. But we flew out there and then did 5 days in the backcountry through
Mhm,
Wyoming. Um, and the Tetons are like absolutely beautiful. You understand, like you fly in and people call it God's country because it's just flat plains where you can imagine like millions of bison used to roam back in the day. And then it just kicks up into these
mhm,
beautiful snow-capped peaks.
mhm,
So yeah, we did some climbing there for 5 days. The last big climb that we did one in Ecuador. We did Aconcagua down in Argentina.
mhm,
We did 5 mountains in 5 days as a challenge in
mhm,
the Colorado, or not Colorado, the Canadian Rockies. So
mhm,
that was just like out of Banff, go out and for 5 days straight, just climb one
mhm.
mountain every day. But you get a sense of purpose when you're in the mountains, and especially with those that you're with. No one makes best friends for life or like true deep connections sitting at the spa or going for a walk or sharing a dinner. You share a tent with someone and you climb for 5 days and you battle the elements and you suffer together and you kind of rely on each other to survive. It creates really deep connections. So I think it's just this level of life that I really enjoy sucking in as much as possible.
You talk about like modern day, we're trying to make things easier.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
in my business, I always tried to make real estate investing as easy as possible for my clients,
Yeah.
and it's never been harder in Ontario.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
hence I've tapped out.
Yep.
You mentioned some good places to invest in the States. No interest. Too easy?
Not necessarily too easy on that front. I do think there is an element, especially for new investors that are starting out. You have to be conscious that there is a journey, right? And not to just bring it back to mountaineering, which is cliche when you talk about mountains, but since I'm actually climbing mountains, maybe I'll use it. But you know, when I climbed Cotopaxi, I had a different mentality. I was a young mountaineer. It was all about getting to the top. I got to the top, and I have a picture. I wish I brought it in or have it on my phone, but I'm
It's not on your
kneeling.
Instagram? No, nothing?
Maybe it's on Instagram, but I think it was pre-Instagram days. But
Mm,
it was me and my climbing buddy Adam, and he's my co-founder of the charity. We're kneeling at the top with our sponsor flag, and if you zoom in close on me, my lips are blue, my eyes are glazed over. I have no memory of that moment. Absolutely zero. I remember climbing up. We started at midnight. But by the time we got halfway up, my memory was gone. I was hypoxic. It was freezing. I wasn't doing well. And we were on a rope team, right? So it was the guide, me, and Adam roped together. So if one of us falls, the other two are going to save that person. And on the way down, I remember sitting down in the snow and feeling warm and fuzzy and having this thought come over me as like, oh, this is how people die on mountains, right? Like your brain convinces you like this is warm, this is comfortable. Your brain actually convinces you you're warm and like don't get up. And that's it. And you literally hear stories of like near death experiences on Everest. That's how people die. And your brain is wired to make you seek comfort. But nowadays when I'm mountaineering, and my point is, I got to the top and don't even remember it. And so if you're doing something for that pinnacle moment, people climb Everest, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, years training, months on the mountain for 5 minutes at the top. So if your whole goal is to be at the top in life, in anything, it's a fleeting moment, right? Because you get to the top and you realize you're on a false summit. There's actually another one behind you. Or you turn around from the top and you die on the way down, or you suffer on the way down. And I think real estate investing is the same. A lot of people see successful real estate investors, they see people with time freedom and freedom in life, and they just want to get to that point. And they suffer really badly, and not the kind of suffering that I like, but they suffer really badly throughout the journey. Every time a tenant calls, they haven't even picked up the phone and they're sweating, or they hire a property manager, and every time their property manager calls, they get emotional and angry that they have to landlord essentially. And I think when they're on that journey, they forget about enjoying the journey. And like, what is the purpose of life if not to live every day and try and enjoy it? And life is there to beat us down, right? And so if you can't find a way to enjoy the journey, you shouldn't be doing it. right? And there's lots of other ways to make money. And yeah, US investing is a much more painless way to invest these days. And if you think about yourself as a real estate investor, you were Mr. Hamilton, right? You were a real estate investor that was like, I know this market, I'm in this market, I'm going to make money in this market, I'm going to show others how to make money in this market and others. And as a real estate investor in person, you tapped out, like you said, right? You went, this is enough. This is the level of suffering that I'm willing to take. And you pivoted into something that was comfortable for you. And I'm sure there's still some suffering involved, and there's still work to be put in. But you're on a journey where you can enjoy that journey. And I think so many investors are just reaching for the top, and they're on a journey that they're really going to hate, and they're going to tap out without having seen the top, or seen a glimpse of the top. And that's where I think people get into it without asking themselves what type of investor they are.
Mhm.
Right. And I know right now in my life, I'm a student rental investor, right? I want cash flow with properties that I don't care about the appreciation on. I know they're going to be a bit more painful, right? There's that part of me coming out. There's
Mhm.
going to be more calls. You got to parent, the students sometimes, but it's good cash flow, and it's setting me up for the next stage of my real estate investing career, which may be a US property, which may be more passive investment, which may be
Mhm.
private lending. Like, you can pivot throughout, but when you're on that journey, you should try and enjoy every step of the way versus just aspiring for the top.
It was enjoyable for a large part of it. Like,
Yeah.
I have a good, I think I have about 4 dozen clients who've made $1 million or more in real estate investing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been possible without Hamilton and
Right.
St. Catharines and KWC and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were joking before you were recording that I called you a sadist, I believe.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
Because Rent Panda, you refreshed my memory because when I first met you, you were already offering leasing
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
on top of promoting properties available for lease on Rent Panda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So take us to why did you start the business?
Yeah. It's a good question. So, to my brother walking in the room and saying, "Come climb Kilimanjaro," I only realized this literally today, that I was sitting in my office working in advertising. At the time, I'd been in advertising for a decade or so. And I came up in advertising doing the standard things. So I worked for agency side, doing client management and account management. And I'd been working at big brands, worked on General Motors, Tropicana, Del Monte, worked that life, and then said, I'm really sick of pushing capitalist product that people don't need. Had a little existential crisis, and came back and decided, I had dabbled in the world of nonprofit, but I realized that there was a world of advertising for nonprofits that was really awesome. I could still do advertising and leverage what I knew, but help causes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in that world doing advertising for causes, sitting in my office, and my brother called me up and said, "Hey, I'm in Thunder Bay." He had moved to Thunder Bay. He was doing his PhD or finishing it up at a UBC, and moved up to Thunder Bay and had a really terrible renting experience where I may have mentioned this story to you, but there was a website called Home Sweet Homes. And that website in 2016 was still based on the premise of, you go on the website and see rental listings, and very, very cursory rental listings. You would e-transfer the owner of that website $20, and then they would send you a Word document with a description of all the properties and the phone number of the landlord to call. And that was the way that people rented properties, on like the majority, in Thunder Bay in 2016. So like, it sounds like 2001, right? It sounds like 1995.
A Word document.
Yeah, a Word doc for $20 on the tenant side. This is not even just landlords paying for them to be featured, but the tenants had to pay $20 for a Word document of listings. And so my brother called me up, and my rental experience in Toronto was viewit.ca. Viewit.ca in 2016 was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And that was it, right?
Yeah.
But it was
Sorry, this is rewind. Are they still around? Do people even talk about VOS?
They are still around.
Are they still as?
No. So
they're not the same.
They're not the same. So they did a few updates, but they're essentially just a little bit of a bygone rental marketplace.
Right.
So
just correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
from my memory, viewit.ca was dominant for commercial apartments.
Yes.
Like almost every apartment building owner, probably the REITs were basically all using, all their listings were on
and
viewit.ca.
most small landlords as well. So this
Yeah,
was
yeah.
pre-Facebook. Kijiji was a little bit, but there was essentially viewit.ca and Craigslist. And so that's how most people found
Mm.
it. And viewit.ca was expensive for landlords to post on. But if you
But
drove
they're
around
dominant.
Toronto,
They're
yeah,
dominant in this
if you drove around
space.
Toronto, you probably can visualize their like blue and white viewit.ca signs. And they were the dominant player. And so in
Yeah.
2016, Thunder Bay was pay $20 and get a Word document. And Toronto was this website that I
Not even a
think,
PDF, it's a
no,
Word
no, no,
document.
no. Yeah.
We can't be bothered to save it as a PDF.
No, no. Um, and in Toronto, viewit.ca, I think at the time had last been updated in like 2011. Like it said, on the bottom of the website, last updated in 2011. So it's essentially an archaic website that was running the majority of the rental marketplace.
Yeah.
So my brother was like, what is life like in Toronto? What is life like in Thunder Bay? And we had that, cliche moment of there's got to be a better way. So at the time, tech is hot. Let's build a prop tech. Can't be that hard. And let's build a better marketplace. So we built a standard marketplace and we went out and stole Airbnb's playbook when they were in their early days of getting in the door of every single landlord, right? They couch surfed their early Airbnbs to talk to those hosts and understand, the mentality of the host. And so what we did was anyone that listed on the website, it was completely free. We offered free photography. So we taught ourselves basic, crappy real estate photography, bought ourselves a $500 camera, and went out to every single landlord who listed on the website for free and took photos. And what that did was not only did it give us a sales platform to push them through to added value tools on the website, but it helped us have conversations with landlords and understand what they were looking for. And so at the time, what they were looking for was being fed by us. And we asked a lot of leading questions unknowingly, and they wanted more tools. So we built a showing scheduler, we built a screening tool, we built, background checks, credit checks, we built a profile for tenants, just like on Airbnb, where we thought down the line, this is going to be a rating system. We built a lease builder, we had end form builders, and we just kept adding software to the platform, thinking that if you build it, they will come, right? And as we expanded, if you add more tools, we will get more people. And we pushed and pushed and pushed. And every time we didn't hit the metrics of how many people we wanted on the platform, which in our minds was prop tech. So it's got to be a hockey stick or else you failed. And we weren't hitting those hockey stick curve numbers. So we just thought we had to add more and we had to add more and we had to add more.
Mm.
And I read a book and I forget the name now, but it was something along the lines of like lean customer development or customer development. And it was about talking to the customer essentially. And we realized that we had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building what we thought people
Yeah.
wanted,
Yeah.
as opposed to actually going back to those original roots and talking to people. And this was a couple of years span.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of stopped everything. And my brother and I said, our prime directive is have conversations. So we had probably over 1,000 one-on-one half-hour coffees with all of these landlords that were on
In Thunder Bay.
in Thunder Bay. We were in Guelph at that point,
Okay.
Kitchener-Waterloo. Anyone who was a landlord, we just tried to talk to and had one-on-one conversations. And we built this standard list of questions that we asked. But what I learned from the book was the magic question at the end was, we've walked you through these various things that you may or may not want, but what is your problem? And they all identified their problem as a fear of unpaid rent and tenant caused damage, which is every landlord, right? But ultimately, we said, if you could wave a magic wand and come up with a solution that solved that problem, what would it be? And in our heads, they were going to say an AI based tool that would post my property and screen my tenants and, give me recommendations so I can just say thumbs up. Right. And we were thinking tech. And they looked us in the eye and they said, find my tenants and manage my properties. Right. And we had this epiphany moment where we're like, holy shit, we are building product and they want service.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this realization that real estate is a people business.
Yeah.
And they just wanted
Technology is not
someone.
the answer, it's the human.
Right.
Yeah.
And so tech can make it better and faster and easier and cheaper, but ultimately they just wanted to hand it off to someone. And so we did a fundamental pivot of the business and just said, we are no longer a prop tech. We are tech enabled real estate, right? We will use the technology, but we will have the people on the ground to empower leasing and property management at a quality and scale that isn't there right now. And that's been the journey that we've been on for 3.5, 4 years now.
So you're part of the problem, making things easy.
Yeah.
People get their evenings and weekends back while you go work.
Yep, for sure. for sure.
Making society soft, Heart.
Yeah. Listen, our clients may disagree, but I think everyone wants to be an investor, right? And doesn't want to be a landlord. And so I think property managers are essentially just hiring out the landlording of investing. And so if we can do that, I think that there is a true way to do it that is both in partnership with investors. So I really hate when investors come to us and say, "I don't know anything about landlording, just do it for me." Right? We try and teach people how to property manage so that then they can hire property managers. I don't think anyone should hire a property manager without knowing intricately what that property manager does. You don't have to necessarily do it yourself, but you should know. But it's very hard to manage a client that doesn't know what we do, that doesn't know what landlording is, that doesn't know basic RTA.
Yeah.
So for us,
Yeah.
we're actually designing like a landlord 101 course. All of 2025 is about content development for landlord education, even bite-sized.
Yeah.
Because if everyone that comes through us or otherwise, every other property management company, every other landlord can just get a little bit more knowledge than they have right now, I think the entire industry would be much better. Everyone would be more comfortable, not in a bad way, but it would help. And we're dealing with a difficult rental market. And like you alluded to beforehand, we are in a rental market right now where I
Sorry,
think,
before we get there,
yeah,
let's talk about what about teaching investors like the basics of
yeah,
landlording
yeah,
or like RT, Residential Tenancy Act.
yes,
What don't people know? I mean,
everything, unfortunately.
it's my house. Why can't you just kick him out? Is
Yeah,
that one?
yeah. What is an Ontario standard lease? Is my property rent controlled? Right, like it's surprising and sad to me the amount of condo investors who've invested in a condo. And in my head, the only reason to invest in a new build condo, like, yes, there were some good returns over the last few years, but the only reason to invest in that, as opposed to a single family home, you have no control in a condo, right? You lose all control. The only reason is because all of the new build condos are non-rent controlled, right? And in a city like Toronto, there will likely be consistent demand for condos in the long term. Right now, we're going through a tough time, but the amount of condo investors that come to me and I ask if they're rent controlled or not, or our entire team, and they're like, "What's rent control?" It's dumbfounding. Like,
Excuse me. Really?
yeah,
What?
yeah,
Excuse me?
yeah. And people say, "Hey, should I
That makes
increase?"
sense. That's the person who bought.
Yeah,
Yeah. Versus like I'm used to talking to very educated people, like
yeah,
EO members, for example,
yep,
and like they express no interest in being a landlord because they understand RTA,
yep,
the challenge of evicting a tenant.
yeah.
You don't have control if you have a tenant,
Yeah.
basically.
And I think that there are more nuanced things that are standard for those who have been in it for a while, but basic maintenance, right? I've seen so many leases where it says, the first $500 of damage, the tenant has to pay for.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Where did this lease come from?
They come. So one thing that I'm finding as things get harder is more experts come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and like Facebook forums are terrible, Facebook groups, but someone
Yeah.
poses a question, right?
Yeah.
Hey, my tenant clogged the toilet.
Yeah.
Who has to pay for that?
Yeah.
Or who has to fix it, right? Not necessarily who has to pay for it, but who has to fix it. And I literally was in the parking lot of your office before I came in, and I read this forum, and half of the answers were the tenant, right? And people will just say, whose obligation is it to fix it? Well, it's the tenants. Well, no, it's the landlord's, right? The landlord has an obligation to repair and maintain the property.
Mhm.
If there is negligence that caused that damage, the landlord has the right to go after the tenant
Yeah.
for the damage.
Yeah, good luck.
But right, but per the RTA, it is the landlord's obligation, right? And people say, "Oh, well, what about changing light bulbs?" It is one line in the RTA, right? Repair and maintenance obligations are on the landlord.
Yeah.
And so all of this misinformation from people that think they know the right answer,
Yeah.
or will just jump at an answer to say, "Oh, my tenant flushed a TV down the toilet. Whose responsibility is it?" Well, yeah, the landlord can likely go after the tenant for negligence,
Yeah.
but the answer is not that it's the tenant's responsibility. All of the onus falls on the landlord. So there's this massive world of misinformation, and we've just gone through an election. It's not, Russia getting involved with misinformation. It's just people that think they know the answer that are propagating incorrect answers. So I've actually started a property management support group on Facebook. And so this is acknowledging that like I'm in competition with other property managers. I want to build a network and community of property managers who can all lean on each other and be voices of reason. Because when you go to these Facebook groups, all of the top contributors with correct answers end up being paralegals, property managers, people who are, highly seasoned investors who are trying to push positive information, but are usually overshadowed by just masses of gray area information and incorrect. So, yeah, I think investors these days were in a perfect storm where money was cheap, people ended up investing, right? And so there's way too many small landlords that got into it without knowing what they were getting into. And now in this market, there's a lot of people who wanted to sell a property who think, well, I'm not going to get what I want from the sale. Let me just rent it out. Right. And those two groups end up being landlords without actively pursuing landlording, which involves educating yourself on how to be a landlord and joining groups and talking to people and surrounding yourself with friends who are investors so that you can actually ask someone who knows what they're talking about. And we just see that all on Facebook and Reddit and the masses of crap information.
That's the joys of social media. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had a gentleman argue with me about how Canada is great for investing, and he's just spouting off economic rhetoric,
Right.
and again, he's not even fully versed because like, for example, New Brunswick just voted Liberal. You know, conservative government, 6 balanced budgets, eh? No, we don't want you anymore. you're you're gone.
Yeah.
Placed by the Liberal government, and so they're going to have rent control starting next year, 3%. And so it's all there. Textbooks have it all there. What happens
Yeah.
with rent control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
And fixed term leases. I mean, it's like you talk to the people in the know, and there's a few key things that have caused the situation that we're in right now. Right. Fixed term leases, rent control.
yeah,
They're just basic things that
yeah.
if you look at other balanced markets, they don't have them. Right. If you play with an open economy, things balance. But yeah, anyways, we
And the
digress.
politicians know because there's no way they don't know. It's just they do it for a short-term opening.
Yeah.
Anyways, I
It's
digress.
votes. Yeah.
I digress. So how is the rental market going? So first off, how many markets do you cover?
So technically all of Ontario.
Yeah.
I would say
So
very
you have your like hands in the pies of all these different markets within Ontario. So
Yeah.
you have a good feeling of
Yeah. And
okay.
how we've built the business is that we have regional centers, and we're transparent about our operations. So on the property management side,
Mhm.
we have no humans in offices in any specific region. We have teams actually across the globe so that we can be 24/7 with our team. Everyone works from home, and property managers just property manage. We're not leasing and property managing. In that way, we can cover property management within every region in Ontario, and hopefully soon to be national and maybe international. But what is needed on the ground is leasing operations
Mhm.
and the trades. So on the trade side, we have a network of trades, and we've actually just partnered with BidMe, which is a contractor bidding platform. So that if you've got a leaky tap and I'm managing your property, we send out that work order through BidMe, and we have a network of 5,000 contractors who bid on the job. So we get better pricing, faster response times. And in that way, they cover Ontario, we cover Ontario,
Mhm.
and the two companies are aligned.
Mhm.
So we can offer better service in that way. And then on the leasing side, we've hired key individuals within regional centers. So as an example, we cover the near north, right? Let's call it like Barrie, right? But we also cover Aurelia and Midland and all the way out to Owen Sound.
Mhm.
If you've got a property in Tobermory, we can probably get there, but we may say, hey, listen, it's not going to be the quality of service. So we'll recommend you to a local Tobermory property manager. The goal is that we will cover absolutely every area, but I would say 95% of where people are investing were covered with key people in a region, and
Mhm.
each person can cover, 150, 200 kilometer
Mhm.
radius. Yeah. So from Thunder Bay in the north down to Niagara in the south and Windsor in the west, all the way out to Ottawa in the east.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So that's why asking questions like how's the market
Yeah.
to you versus someone like, oh, I have 10 properties in Ajax.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'll it's even better when they say they know everything.
Right.
Well, let me tell you how it is out in Windsor.
Yeah.
So how is the rental market?
So,
Where do you want to start?
well, I think you brought up a good point of how is the rental market is a bad question to ask. Not saying you asked a bad question, but it's a great segue into the rental market is a market that is harder to make money in than it used to be, right? And that's why you're wearing the hat that you're wearing. But looking at even just the Ontario rental market versus the Canadian rental market, um, it's a very hard market to participate in. Money has gotten more expensive. It's getting cheaper again, but less properties are cash flowing. Properties aren't appreciating like they used to be, and a lot are depreciating. So as an investor, it's harder. But also, when it comes to the fundamentals of renting out a property and managing that property, there are less quality tenants than ever before. So we rent. We work with Single Key and run all of our rental reports through them, and have partnered together. We ran a report on the quality of tenant, which is very qualitative in its explanation, but it can be put down to quantitative metrics, right? So average credit scores have dropped consistently over the last 2 years. The number of collections reported per set of applications has gone up. So now we're looking at 18% of all applications have collections in them. And
Sorry, what percentage?
18%, 18.4%, I think was the last number. And
So these people have
bankruptcies.
no hope of renting something. Like they can't even get a credit card.
Yeah. So, I mean, we see a lot of like Capital One credit cards these days because Capital One will give anyone a credit card. And bankruptcies was astonishing. So, bankruptcies has doubled in the last year. So, the
So
numbers
they're not going bankrupt, but that they have it on their credit.
reported bankruptcies.
Yeah.
At the same time, income to rent ratios have shifted quite dramatically from the age old, 30% and under is a good amount, right? So usually you don't want to spend more than 30% of your income on rent or on housing costs in general.
Mhm.
The latest stat, and we actually pushed our data provider. So we work with Door Insight as a data provider on the secondary rental market. Um, right now, if we look at the GTA, household income, not just personal income, we're up to 45% of household income is being spent on rent. And that's the average.
That's
Right?
just rent. That's not
It's
utilities,
just rent.
not
So
insurance,
it's
not.
it's an astronomical number when you also couple that with a market where everything is more expensive. So we touched on this before
Yeah,
we started
groceries are
rolling.
bad.
Yeah, but there's an affordability crisis happening across the board. So when
Yeah.
you're spending 45, and this is average again, so when you're spending 45% of your income on rent, and then you add on utilities and insurance and your car expenses and your schooling expenses, there's not much to live on at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
so when you go to look at your housing situation, if you're at that 35% rate right now, and you need a bigger house for your growing family and you're in a rental mindset, you're not looking to buy, you're just looking to rent, do you really want to move for a little bit more space or an extra bedroom that's then going to push you into 45% or 50% of your household
Yeah,
income?
and lose your rent control.
Right. So those that don't have to move aren't moving. So what that happens is, we've got all these people with collections and bankruptcies and lower income,
Nowhere to go.
nowhere to go, and all of those who don't have to move aren't moving. So when you're an investor with a property that you've bought, when money was cheap and you've put a lot into it and you need a certain number to
Mhm.
make your numbers work, and you've pegged your rent number and you put it out in a market where there is now an oversupply because all of these investors flock to these markets and now no one's moving and the quality of tenants is low, you're in a situation where you're screwed, right? And now finally, it's not a good thing for investors, but rents are dropping, right?
Mhm.
And rents have been dropping for the last 9 months. And whatever the CBC says is incorrect because they still say rents are going through the roof, but rents are dropping. And I think it's a good thing because rents need to stabilize and they need to balance with that affordability crisis that's happening. Because a lot of investors will talk about the housing crisis, right? They'll say, I'm building more housing because there's a housing crisis. I should be able to find tenants. Yes, we can find you tenants, but they will be on ODSP and they will be struggling to make ends meet and they will not be A plus tenants without a lot more work and a lot more effort and a lot more time. So vacancy rates are, true vacancy rates are probably 4 to 5%, whereas CMHC reports 1.8 to 2%. The time on market Again, the MLS will report time on market is like 7 to 10 days. Well, the MLS does not capture the rental market in reality in Welland, right, or in Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
So time on market, our average right now is around 42 days, right? We'd love that to be well under a month, but it's just not, because to get the right tenant takes more effort, takes longer. And as a business, we are spending more on every single contract than we ever have in the past. So that's more money on advertising. It's more time and effort. More trips out to a property means more gas, and gas is more expensive than it used to be. And so the cost of everything is going up, which means as a business, our margins are shrinking. And at the same time, it's taking longer, even with that extra effort. So investors are more emotional, right? Because I'm an investor myself. Sitting on vacancy sucks. So when you are sitting on vacancy longer, you naturally go, hey, leasing team, property management team, what the hell's going on?
Crack the whip.
Do more. Exactly. And so we spend more money. And then it's just this vicious cycle. And I think it's part of the education that I wish was out there, where, like rentals.ca does a good job of producing a monthly rent report. I wish that there was a, communal rent report where everyone that has data got together, and it was democratized data on the secondary rental market to say, here's what the actual data shows. Because when you look at CMHC numbers and you listen to realtors who are selling investment properties and trying to push investment properties, everything is still sunshines and rainbows. But it's just not the case. And it's part of that property manager support group, because it's harder as property managers, and we want to get together and say, hey, not only do you have a shoulder to cry on when your clients are all barking at you left, right, and center, but let's work together to re-educate on what's actually happening out there, so that we can kind of temper things and hopefully balance the market a little bit. Yeah,
That's mouthful.
it is.
I was literally looking at a pro forma from a friend for a multifamily in Port Colborne,
Mhm.
because he has at least nice performance. So I just wanted to look at the numbers,
Yeah.
and for vacancy they had 2%.
Yeah.
Port Colborne, sound reasonable?
Yeah. Yeah.
2%.
So the it does sound reasonable, because digging deeper into how the rental market is doing, I didn't even finish my last point, but how the rental market is doing is the wrong question, because how the rental market is doing within a city, within even neighborhoods, and within an asset class in those neighborhoods is really the right question to ask. So Port Colborne, I would say, is like a tertiary market, if not like a fourth tier market, and they are doing really well. So if you look at not even just like Belleville, but Napanee, right? Like if you go outside of the tertiary markets, there's a lot of interest in those markets.
Interesting.
More and more people are moving there. There's more businesses that are moving out there because everything is more expensive, and so when you're living and working in an urban center as an employer, you're looking at other opportunities, right? So those non-urban centers are starting to grow. And so from a rental perspective, there's opportunity there. It's, we're invested in tertiary markets. We're invested in student rentals there too. But Peterborough was hot a couple of years ago. Now Peterborough is still stable, but even if you go outside of Peterborough, there's some markets that are good. Or if you look at, Welland as an example, Welland is kind of oversaturated. If you drop down into like Fort Erie.
Sorry, explain oversaturated. Like the builders built too many, the investors built too many.
The investors built too many,
right.
From what we see at least.
Right.
So, a lot of people, money was cheap. They dropped, they heard about Welland.
Yeah.
It was cheap to buy up a property. They converted a single family home into a duplex.
The town was easy to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they would, like, permits were easy to get.
Yeah. And from like a typical real estate perspective, if you look at the numbers, the days on market has gone through the roof, and also the months of inventory is quite high. It's not usually a number that we look at in rentals, but it was an interesting one that we started looking at a couple months ago, because as the inventory started to escalate and more people were investing there, the demand never caught up. And so the number of new units on the market was, let's say 100. The number of units rented that month per month, right? The number of units rented was 48.
Ooh.
That happens 2 months in a row, 3 months in a row, 4 months in a row. All of a sudden you've got 3 or 4 months of inventory sitting there, which means your time to lease starts going through the roof. So that's a market like Welland right now. It's starting to bounce back, thankfully. So it's stabilizing. But if you go outside of Welland and you look at some of the smaller markets there, they're actually doing quite well. And so 2% vacancy in Port Colborne in a multifamily actually sounds reasonable to me.
Interesting.
Cities like Rockville are, Cornwall, they're little cities that are kind of not gold mines. I don't want to like push people out there, but there are cities still with opportunity. And as like a stable Ontario investor, talking to someone who's been telling me to get out of Ontario for a while, I still think that within an asset class and within certain markets, there's still an opportunity in Ontario, if you understand the tenant dynamic, right? And it takes more work to do it. So again, maybe that's the masochist in me where I'm staying in Ontario for
Yeah,
now.
you are. Yeah, you are.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think that there's also something to diversification of a portfolio. So I probably need to listen to more of your style of advice and diversify. But
Yeah. Do you have
um,
any assets in U.S. denominated in U.S. dollars?
no, not yet.
Hmm. No
Yeah,
gold, no Bitcoin, no
no
U.S.
gold,
real
no
estate.
Bitcoin just yet.
Hmm.
Although you caught me on the steps of your building, reading building a book about Bitcoin. So I think in my journey of investing, not just real estate investing, but investing in general,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still at the very start of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last 8 years of my life has been pouring everything possible into Rent
Right.
Panda.
Right.
And now finally I'm like, hey, maybe I should diversify outside of just Rent
Right.
Panda into my own stuff.
Right.
And also, I've seen a lot of real estate investors do really well. And it's hard to sit at the table with people who've made a lot of money while you're being the garbage man without saying, hey, let me be the garbage man and the monopoly man investor behind the scenes. So I've started to do both.
It's interesting just think being around entrepreneurs organization, for example, like I meet many people who
Hmm.
cash flow very significant money,
Yep.
like, low six figure, half mil a year in cash flow from their businesses.
Yep.
And that doesn't exist in real estate investing. So there
Right.
really is, I think really needs to be some sort of balance between
Yep.
the two.
For sure. For
What,
sure.
if you're making a mil a year, you're going to be banking something. You're like, I need to put this somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And my hope with Rent Panda is that we start to scale to a point where it can be a little bit more passive for me, because I think diversification of my skill set and my day to day life is part of that personal development. And
Hmm.
so, I've been on this journey of working out more, thinking about mental health more, thinking about being a father first. I have this vision board now of being an active dad, right? Like I want to be the dad that at 18, when my kid's 18, I can still physically dominate him, right? I
Hmm.
can drop out there on the hockey rink or the basketball court and still be an active dad.
Yeah.
And I think doing that now
Yeah.
will help my business.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I should be a business person and a dad and a real estate investor and an investor outside of real estate to make sure that me and my family and my community
Hmm.
are protected and supported. Yeah.
The kids are in martial arts.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll make it to 18 that can beat them.
Now,
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll
yeah.
see. Yeah, because I'm trying to make them good athletes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a good athlete that does martial arts is
Tough to beat. Yeah. Maybe just raw power though, like just a little, just stronger than them.
yeah, but they're doing jujitsu, so they grab your foot and you're done.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing you can do because you can't even reach them.
Join the class with them then.
Then I'll get hurt
Yeah.
because I'm too old for that shit. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So what are so yeah, so you mentioned like the beyond tertiary markets are
Yeah.
what's working. Which is fascinating,
Yeah.
but I guess the point is also just to avoid oversaturation by the investors
Hmm.
because like the gentleman who went up north, I don't know if you had much interaction with them, but they were in like Timmins, for
Yep.
example,
Yeah.
like markets with like shrinking
Yep.
populations. But they had like 200 houses in a population of like under 50,000 people.
Yeah. And that issue is it kind of underlines the problem of oversupply or over
Yeah.
intensification because it was Timmins, Sudbury, Sault
Yeah.
Ste. Marie, and I think Kirkland Lake.
And also,
Um,
they're all really far from a major center. Like
yeah,
Cornwall, at least, is a reasonable distance to
yeah,
Ottawa or Montreal,
yeah,
isn't it? And a lot of the other places you mentioned, they're all on the 401.
yeah, for sure.
Like
So
Timmins,
I think,
Sault Ste. Marie,
yeah,
what? Like they're all really far from each other.
yeah. So I think that's actually a good point in terms of the opportunity that I see out there. So I'm heavily invested in Thunder Bay. We started our business in Thunder Bay, so we know it quite well. We have a team there. Um, we know the intricacies of the city and of investing in the city. But it's a big opportunity that I think these guys capitalized on until they pushed too hard and too fast and flew
Yeah,
too close
too
to the
fast, too
sun.
much
Yeah.
vacancy.
But
Yeah.
when you go to the north, like Sault Ste. Marie is a center unto its own, right? And so when you're in the north, if you're in North Bay and Sudbury and Timmins, you kind of look to, and maybe I'm going to get, whipped by those who live there, but Sault Ste. Marie is the center. And I say this from a Thunder Bay perspective, where Thunder Bay is the big city for a lot of people, because if you go out across the Canada Highway, and there it's like the Trans Canada Highway there. Literally, my brother lives 5 minutes off of it, and he's just got a regular house. Everyone comes to Thunder Bay. It's got the university, the college, the hospital, all of the industry and infrastructure is in Thunder Bay. And there's a ton of small communities outside of Thunder Bay, and they're very, very small, as opposed to, yes, outside of Ottawa is Cornwall, which is a significant size city in comparison to the north. But when you go to the north, or even just the near north, you get into these situations where you can really dominate a market. And it can be dangerous to do that because, as they've shown, you can own a very large percentage of the rental housing within that city. And so you can start to shift the dynamic. And we're finding that in Thunder Bay, both as an opportunity, but also as a risk, is like, from a student housing perspective, we could look at creating a small fund and buying up an entire neighborhood, right? Our last purchase, or 2 purchases ago, was a $220,000 house. This last one was $300,000. Each of these homes will gross between $4,000 and $5,500 a month. They'll net, let's call it $2,000 a month on average. If you told a Toronto investor that they were going to net $2,000 a month, they'd ask you where to sign. But they're also in the mindset of appreciation is going to be through the roof. Whereas in Thunder Bay, it's not the case. You're at 1.5%, 2% annually, maybe.
Yeah, too many investors try to want everything.
Yeah. And so, it's right for us at this stage in our journey, but you can own a neighborhood, right? We can turn a neighborhood into a student ghetto, right? Or we can take a student ghetto and make it better quality student housing. We can, change the zoning bylaw. Like, we can work at an advocacy level to actually make change with the city and rezone that for boarding house. So I think that there's huge opportunities, but we're not looking at it as the Canadian rental industry. We're not looking at it as the Ontario rental market. We're not even just looking at it as Thunder Bay. We're looking at it as a neighborhood within Thunder Bay in an asset class for a specific tenant profile. And we're specifically targeting East Indian international students attending usually Confederation College for IT programs. It's like, you get super niche and you can create good businesses out of it. And, that's where I think we're at in this industry, where, a Canada-wide rental report is almost useless. You need to really drill down to the micro to understand who you are as an investor and where you want to go, and educate yourself within that realm.
Investors can never forget that real estate is almost street specific.
100%.
I was literally on stage debating vacancy rates of Memphis, Tennessee.
Right.
And the other gentleman with the mic said, "Oh, the vacancy is really over double digit there. I wouldn't invest there. I wouldn't recommend it."
Right.
And I was just talking about my client who bought a house there.
Yeah.
So then I checked with our CIO. He goes, like, we literally just had an appraisal there last week, and they said, the appraiser said 5% vacancy.
Right.
Expect a tenant in one month.
Right.
Right. So, but again, it was a nicer suburb.
Yep.
And again, like, everyone's context is different.
Yeah.
Someone has a REIT, like, say they're doing new builds.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a different neighborhood than I am.
Yeah.
Right. So it is. And then, yeah. So I knew the question is, how is the market? Wasn't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the perfect question to ask
To
someone
start
like
with.
me, because I love to talk about the fact that most investors ask the number one question. Like, I've been at events and it's like, hey, what does a 3-bedroom house go for in the Niagara region? Well, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's not.
When I talk to you, I get really specific.
Yeah, exactly.
West Mountain,
Yeah.
3-bedroom,
Yeah,
upstairs,
with a dishwasher and one parking spot. Like,
get specific.
It's so
renovate
specific.
this year.
Yeah. And our team is interesting in that, Jack, who's our director of leasing, just wrote to me, and as we do at like 11:30 last night, and like, hey, can we do a survey of all of the tenants that come through our system, which is a lot, and on the website and with our day-to-day interactions, and ask them, what they're looking for and what the value of things are, like amenities. And it's something like, there's no report on the value of amenities. And I'm sure you've been asked this question by clients a lot, of like, should I put a dishwasher in, right? Or should I rent furnished
laundry?
Or furnished or unfurnished, right? What percent does that move the needle? And we can make guesses and we can look at comparables and guess, but no one has ever surveyed, to my knowledge, the tenant pool and said like, hey, here's a house. Now here's a house with in-suite laundry, the exact same. What would you pay for this? And
How much more would you pay for it?
yeah, and quantitatively mapping that data to say a dishwasher is worth 37.50 a month to a tenant. And I think that's the type of mindset that we need more of in this marketplace. And I give kudos to Jack for mentioning that, because like, to think about the rental experience as a hospitality business is something that we've tried to do more and more.
Mm.
And he's got a hospitality background. So he's like, hey, yes, our clients are landlords, but our stakeholders are tenants still. And so we need to understand both sides of the coin. And if we can pioneer data that helps investors and tenants on both sides of the coin,
Mhm.
let's do that. And we have the forum to be able to. So it's that kind of cool stuff that like brings me back to the days of when we were a prop tech saying, hey, if we dominate every market and we are the rental marketplace, the data set is really where we can affect change.
Hart, I want to ask you more about your international student strategy in Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
Like, paint us a picture. Like, are these houses? These apartment buildings? What is it?
Yeah. So we're still on the route of single family homes turned into either multi unit student rentals or single unit student rentals. And we've looked at some commercial and converting that into residential. But right now, we're looking at single family homes mostly in this market that we can put 5 to 9 bedrooms in.
And the city's cool with this? Like, if
So
it's
some will be falling under like the boarding house ruling and
yeah.
will adhere to that.
Okay.
In others, we can be non-conforming because we're looking to reform some of that zoning bylaw and push that through. But ultimately for us, it's about building safe quality
Mhm.
student housing
Mhm.
for a demographic
Right.
that is really in poor quality housing right now.
Right.
So you've probably heard stories of, the stereotypical Brampton landlord that has too many people in their house, right? They've got 3 rooms and there's 9 people all sharing a room. We actually talked to the college and the university in Thunder Bay, and they were telling stories of not just multiple occupancy within a room or double occupancy in a room or triple occupancy in a room. They were talking about bed sharing, which was the first time I had ever heard about it. But if you think about an international student coming to the country, they're paying more in tuition, usually 3 to 4 times what a local student is paying. They're being supported by family, but they're also pushed to work hard and move towards PR. So
Yeah,
they're
permanent resident. Yeah.
yeah, so they are um, in school 8 hours a day. They also have part-time jobs because they want to make extra money. They're looking to build credit. They're looking to stay on the good side of the university and the community, and they're looking to save money. And so we found cases of people flipping beds. So a student will rent a bed for $150 a month versus, or a portion of a bed, I should say, and they will have it for 12 hours. And, when they're at school and at their job, someone else will be sleeping in that bed. And that'll be in a room that's double occupancy. So you've taken a $800 a month room, cut it into 400 per bed, and cut it into 200 per 12-hour cycle in that bed. And so that was the situation that we were dealing with in Thunder Bay. And we saw it as a massive opportunity to come in and provide quality student housing. It's profitable for us, it's cash flowing property. We're bringing up the quality of housing. Like the actual houses are usually century homes that need a bunch of work, but they can be retrofitted into high quality student housing. So that's what we're doing. And
Mhm.
as an example, we bought one. It was $220,000 to buy. We put about $100 to $120,000 into it, and that place is grossing 52 to 5,400 a month, and netting around $2,000. Usually more, but that's $2,000 with vacancy cost in there. We're paying our own property management fees. So, Rent Panda has investors in it. So I'm not, getting property management for free. So we are paying for property management. We've got repair costs banked away in there and we're putting that at 5%, vacancy at 5%. So we're running our numbers very conservatively. And that net number is after all of that. So it's the true net.
What's different about an international student rental property versus like a regular rental property?
Mhm.
So if someone to do like what is the property? How do you cater towards this demographic?
Yeah. So the first thing is, to our conversation before, making sure you are the right investor for it, because student rentals in general require more handholding than
But you're doing the
regular
work, aren't
rentals.
you?
Well, exactly. So if you hire a property manager, then for all intents and purposes, the only difference is higher turnover. Because typically, yes, students will stay for 4 years, but the numbers show that students are really staying for like 12 to 18 months. And especially when you're doing room rentals, um, rooms will turn over a lot faster than the full house. But you can imagine, 4 or 5 kids getting together, getting on one lease. People are going to get into fights, disagree, move on after a year, 2 years. The group is going to break up. So you need to account for higher vacancy costs. And that's why we put ours at 5%. And then if you're not property managing, right? If you don't have a property manager and you are property managing yourself, you need to be conscious that not only are you the landlord and the property manager, you're also kind of a parent. And so when you set up the property, you need to set it up thinking about a 17 to 21-year-old kid living in that property.
Yeah.
So you should have, a booklet of how to live in that property. And we create a booklet for all of our rooms in our houses. And that's on the bedside table when they move in day one. That's got a QR code on the front where they can pull up a video, because everyone's on their phones and they don't actually read anything, a video of how to use everything, right? Common area rules, how to clear out a lint trap, how to unclog a toilet, right? Like what to do if the shower starts backing up. All of these standard things where a lot of investors who are placing families think, oh, it's a family. They know how to live in a house. Students do not know how to live in a house. And when you're dealing with international
Yeah,
students,
literally, like
yeah,
I can't. I have university students who don't know how to change a light bulb,
right,
right?
right,
So they know the age old question: how many university students does it take to change a light bulb?
yeah,
None, because they can't do it.
right, yeah,
They literally called us to do it.
yeah, exactly.
The light's
And
broken. It's not
right,
broken. The light bulb is broken.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we get calls all the time like the toilet's not flushing properly. Okay, what's happening? Is it not flushing? Is it going down slow? Is it running? Like, there's no question about that. So whether you're property managing or not, like the repair costs are going to be higher, right? There's going to be more wear and tear, and there's going to be more unnecessary calls, right? So you may have to have a plumber go out there when there was nothing actually wrong, or your handyman is going to be visiting the property more. We like to do mandatory cleanings as part of our student rentals, whether that's local students or international students. I think that's a very good thing to have in place. We pass along that cost, or in some cases we eat it if necessary, depending on how the market is doing. But a cleaner, just like with an Airbnb, a cleaner is your best eyes on the property. And when you think about the high use areas of a house, it's bathrooms and it's kitchens, right? So, and maybe like the front entranceway.
Hmm.
So clean the flooring in your front entranceway, especially in the wintertime, so the salt doesn't rip into your vinyl flooring or hardwood flooring, right? Have your stove cleaned on a monthly basis, like full on scrubbed clean, because those students are not cleaning the stove ever, right? So a deep clean once a month replaces a standard family who's, scrubbing it down once a week. Bathrooms should be cleaned properly and regularly. And when your cleaner is there, have a checklist of things for them to go through, right? Notice any light bulbs that are burnt out, flush every toilet and see if it flushes
Right, right.
properly. Clean out the hair from, your drains, especially if you've got lots of girls in the house, not to be stereotypical, but if you've got hairy people in the house, clean out your drains. And just hiring a cleaner without a checklist of things that they should be checking is also kind of being lazy.
Hmm.
So it's in this world of, you got to work harder for it, but it can be lucrative. And we know lots of landlords who have appreciating properties in Toronto and Kingston and London and, Waterloo as a great
Hmm.
example, who have cash flow because they're student rentals and appreciation. So I think it's a very strong lucrative market. I know you've got past experience in student rentals, and I think,
It's like the flavor right now because no one
yeah,
wants long-term tenants.
right. And I think when we did it, we saw a really big opportunity because we had connections to the university and the college. We understood the dynamics of Thunder Bay, and we specifically went, yep, it's East Indian students coming to the city, primarily male. And that is the demographic that we can capitalize on, but is also in the most need. So it's incredibly important for us to actually solve a problem, because back to my tech days, like, you build a product to solve a problem.
Mhm.
And I think that's what rental housing is you see the problem.
Mhm.
And, if I was a type of landlord that really loved luxury housing, right, and I wanted to buy a luxury home and have an executive live in it, I would not be investing right now because it's a terrible time for, executive luxury rentals. So you just have to know who
Yeah,
you are
flooding
and
the
where.
market.
Yeah, exactly.
All the short-term rentals are going to midterm.
Yep.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide in this
Yeah,
market.
for sure.
Does Rent Panda do student rental management across the province?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
So it's actually an interesting question, and maybe you'll have an answer to this, but we often get asked as a property management company if we do student rentals. And I think it's because a lot of companies out there who are property managing will just say no
yeah,
to student
mostly no.
rentals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And for us, I've always looked at it as a rental is a rental. And we've built our systems with tech as the backbone. So we don't care if it's a annoying family, not annoying, but if it's a needy family or a needy student or a room rental in your basement and you live upstairs, like, for us, a rental is a rental and it all runs on the same tech system. And, some of the setting up of a property is
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
But as a property manager, a work order is a work order, right? A repair is a repair, a call is a call, an email is an email. The cadence of that may change, but that just means our pricing has to change. And I think when we started property management, I hated the concept of a percent of monthly rent as a fee, right? Because it's just a way for property managers to make more money on more expensive property that is not more expensive to manage. And if it was true, it should actually be that less expensive property is more expensive to hire a property manager for. And that's student rentals, right? Some people will put a premium on student rentals. Um, but we wanted to build a system where for us, it's flat rate management and we know how much it costs us to manage a property. So a duplex per unit is easier to manage than a single family home because it's one system, right? It's one furnace for two properties or two units. So that is more efficient for us to manage. When we need to inspect two units, it's more efficient than inspecting two single family homes because there's travel time and there's, lockbox entry and all the tiny little things. So we charge less per unit for a duplex versus a single family home. A 20 unit building is a different model per unit than a single family home. So we tried to change the game and make it fair and actually be transparent of, if it costs us less to manage your property, we'll charge you less to manage your property. And so, executive rentals, people, when they were big,
Hmm.
people were flocking because we could manage your $10,000 a month rental for $99 a month, right? Versus even in Toronto, people were still charging 3, 4, 5% in management. You go up to Thunder Bay, standard is 10 to 12% in management. You go short-term rentals in Thunder Bay, you're paying out 25 to 30% in management. So yeah, I think that there's still an opportunity to innovate within the space, but you have to build the right system for it.
So yes, so the answer is yes.
So
You do.
yes, we do student rentals.
You
Yeah.
do you pretty much what you cover pretty much every real estate strategy then? What
Yep.
don't you cover? Airbnb? Like what?
Yeah. So we don't do short-term rentals.
Yeah.
We used to because we fall into that habit, as most people do, of chasing
Trying something?
shiny objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 25%, 30% management fees look real good, especially when the Airbnb is doing well. But we found that at the time, it's a separate system. It's a different business. We inject hospitality into property management, but that is the hospitality business. One day we may parse out a division that is doing short-term rentals,
Mhm.
but for us, it's long-term. And even in the midterm rental space, we again started to dabble in it. And we push it out to those who do it full time and proper, right?
Mhm.
And there are companies out there that do that. But for us, even midterm rentals, when we get into tenant placement, it doesn't make sense, right? If we're going to charge a month's rent to place a tenant and you're an investor that wants a midterm rental of 3 to 4 months, it doesn't make sense logically to pay out a month's rent. So we can't make it make sense from a business perspective. So we're just not going to do that. We can manage a midterm rental because it's very similar to a long-term rental, but we don't do lots of them. And really, I like to paint the picture of us being the rental experts for standard long-term residential housing. And that can be a room rental in your basement or your 500 unit purpose built apartment, because that's all the same within our sector. Yeah.
You've been very generous with your time. Anything else you want to tell us about Rent Panda?
I mean, ultimately, I think we're trying to build a world where everyone can be a landlord. And I don't think it's a world where everyone should be a landlord, but truly the vision is that everyone can be a landlord. And it's just about having the right products and services and tools and team to do it. And I do fundamentally think that real estate is an amazing vehicle for wealth generation and generational wealth. And it's something that more and more people can be a part of, and we're truly on that path to do it. But I do think there's a lot of egos that need to be shed, and so we're trying to build like the allied powers of the real estate space and bring together partners who can do it well, who have the same vision, who can really help support landlords. And other elements of the business are adapting for this vision. So one of my aspirations for next year is to actually invest in properties as a business and offer our employees fractional ownership of that property. Because if you're a property manager or a leasing specialist in Cornwall, you know you may not have aspirations to own a property, and it may not be realistic with the salary levels in that region. So as a company, can we enable landlording for our staff, for our clients? Can we work with rent to own operators to help tenants become landlords? And so we really do want to facilitate that as a vision. And I think that there's a lot of growth that the Ontario and Canadian rental industry needs, and it needs to catch up to the States, right? And there has to be advocacy and reform that goes along with it. And so there's groups like Solo, or I'm a part of the Landlord Self-Help Center board. And I don't think it's a solution that's solvable by one entity. So my my call to action essentially is not just for the investors out there, but for other companies, other organizations, other associations out there, to really have an open mind to band together and to help push this industry forward to where it needs to go. Because as a private sector, we need to push the public sector and government and the individuals to do some reform and make it better for everyone.
Where can people learn more about Rent Panda?
On rentpanda.ca, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can email us at hello@rentpanda.ca. But ultimately, if you fill out the form on Rent Panda saying you're interested, I'm going to be giving you a call still. So I have that mandate now. We'll see how long it lasts for, but I connect with every single new client that we've got coming on board. And I like to talk to investors too, because just like this, it's always great to have a conversation. We learn a lot from our investor networks. So rentpanda.ca is probably the best place.
You have resources at your website as well, do you not?
Yeah, so we've got a rent report that we put out in partnership with Door Insight. We've got a lot of blogs that are just educational. We have all of your end forms on the website. And starting in January, our Instagram is just going to be flooded with educational content. I'd love to release like a Landlord 101 course and make it mandatory for everyone in Ontario. But until then, it'll be free educational content to just hopefully make things better for us all.
You may talk a lot of condo investors out of buying a place with with education.
Yeah,
Hart, thanks so much. Thanks so
thank
much for
you.
doing this. Thanks for fighting the good battle.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being the sadist, as I called you, because someone's got to do it.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. Well, we'll go for a cold plunge one day. So, yeah.
All right, friends, that wraps up another episode of the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. Hope you got as much out of this one as I did. Remember that whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, there's always something new to learn, and it's always about building that practical knowledge base that gets you closer to financial freedom. If you found value today, please do us a favor and leave us a review or a rating, share this episode with a friend, or better yet, join our community of real estate investors who are taking action and making moves. And hey, if there's a topic you want us to cover or have there's a certain guest you'd like us to have on the show, drop me a line. My DMs are open on social media. Reply to this email that this have arrived on. I'm not hard to find. We're all about getting you the unfiltered truth to help you on your journey. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next episode. Until then, stay smart, stay curious, and keep building that future. Catch you later.